This story up in Jacksonville today that I did the 2 live feeds on about this petulant, spoiled little gamer boy from Maryland who didn't win his pretend make-believe computer football game and decided it was so serious that he needed to pull out a weapon and start using it. It kind of got me thinking about the reasons anyone would pick up a weapon and do something like this. And in this video, I'm going to need you to stay with me because I'm going to take you down a couple of different roads. It's going to lend itself more to the mind of chess players than it will NASCAR fans. And I'm sorry if that sounds discriminatory, but this is going to be a fairly complex video. You see, a story came out earlier that I was going to do a video on when this all fell apart. You see, it's about this anti-corruption measure in Colombia. None of you are probably unclear about my position on Colombia versus Venezuela. It's a great contrast when we hear our government talking about corruption or things of this nature being the reason for sanctions on Venezuela, completely looking the other way when it comes to Colombia. Well, the people of Colombia have been fed up with this for a long time. And so they put these measures, 7 different of them, on this referendum. And because the referendum didn't meet what they call quorum, they failed. Now, when you hear the details of this, if this doesn't make you angry, I don't know what will. 99% of the people voted for this 7-measure referendum, anti-corruption measures. Here are the measures. Okay, they've had a lot of problems with graft and bribes and all the kind of stuff that you would normally hear about. Graft costs this country $17 billion a year, 5.3% of their GDP. For this to have been valid, each question needed just over 12.1 million votes cast. With 99% reporting, just 11.6 million people had voted, under a third of the 36.4 million eligible voters. Each of the 7 questions, including bans on alternative sentences like house arrest for corruption, forcing elected officials to publish their tax returns, 3-term limit on local and national lawmakers, reducing their minimum salary to what they call 25 minimum salaries, basically 25 times their minimum wage. I mean, down there, they're earning $10,000 a month. To Americans, that doesn't sound like, extreme, but to this place it is, given that most people down there earn $260 a month. So let me put this in perspective for you, numbers-wise. In the 2016 election, 120 million people voted, grand total, out of a country that has 326 million people. Meaning we barely had a third, grand total, of the people in this country voting. This is what they call quorum. Quorum is a term that I used in 2 different videos, and you can find these on my page. One's called The Mathematics of Faithless Electors, and the other one's called The Current Leader Cult of Personality Exposed. And you'll have to go back a ways, but I use this term, quorum. It's at the 12:35-minute mark of this video, and at the 9:26 mark of this video, talking about quorum, meaning a certain amount of people have to participate in the vote for the vote to even matter. Now, why is this important? To put this in U.S. numbers, imagine if 105 million people in this country went to the polls and voted on a certain measure. And then Congress came back and said, oh, I'm sorry, you needed 110 participate, even though 99% of you all voted, of this 105 million people, all voted for this measure. Sorry, it doesn't count, because you needed 110 of you to show up, 110 million of you to show up. How upset would you be in this country if 110 million citizens of the United States showed up and you virtually unanimously voted for something, and the government turned around and said, yep, sorry, doesn't count. You were short by a certain percent because of this term called quorum, with virtually no opposition to it whatsoever. Most of it having to do with the government itself being corrupt. Now, here's what will blow your mind. 326 million people in this country as of 2018, with a yearly change of 0.71%. Pretty steady, 0.7, 0.72% a year. Now, remember our good friends in Venezuela? The ones with the massive flight of people leaving the country? Here's their numbers. And this is right off of worldometers.info. Here's their percent of change. So they've dropped from about, they're up at 4.5 down here in 1955. It's slowly gone down, but they're at 1.26, almost double the percent of change upward in population as the U.S. has. Meaning there are more people in Venezuela making other people. And that's just a nice way of saying a certain thing that I think you can use your imagination and figure out. Now, what does all this have to do with this issue up in Jackson? Why is it all tying together? You have this kid who's taken video games so God-blessed seriously that when he loses one, he feels the need to pick up a weapon. We have people in a country that are trying, virtually in unison trying, to get rid of corruption in their country. And they have a government that's so corrupt they won't even let them when they vote for it. That's led to this. Now I'm going to show you a bunch of pictures and I want you to tell me what they all have in common. You see, we have a country down here, 2 of them, where the women in these countries know right from wrong, that even while fighting a guerrilla war, have time to, well, make new people. The growth rates, population rates in these countries are double what they are in the United States. And they're 90% Christian. And we just had an event in our country where some spoiled, rotten little gamer boy, spending most of his time playing video games, got so upset over a video game that he decided to open up on a whole bunch of other boys playing video games, boys in men's bodies. And this is what's going on down here. Do you see why we might be in deep trouble? These countries have women who are better fighters and have better judgment and are better soldiers than our young men are, and even then have time to make new human beings at twice the rate we do. Tell me I'm wrong. Because when they've tried to do it the way that, quote-unquote, civilized societies would do it, this is what they get. So when you hear about the war that's going to come down there, and you hear about this evil guerrilla group or that evil guerrilla group, understand they tried to do it this way. They tried to do it at the ballot box. A third of this country showed up. Just under a third of this country showed up and voted unanimously for reasonable measures to be taken to curb corruption, and their government just said, nope, sorry, we'd rather have a guerrilla war with you. And those who are showing up to fight it are the women of their country. We might be in deep shit. Like, share, subscribe.